customers losing their job and for banker suicides.
And we have another headline regarding a form of immortality, which is irreversibility. And that is lifelong damage caused to the children of Flint, Michigan. Flint, Michigan, it has a population of about 99,000. It used to have a population of closer to 150,000 just 20 years ago. Part of that, as you saw, across Michigan, you've had emergency managers placed in, basically democracy suspended. The local councils are not to have any opinion. There's an emergency financial administrator. And unlike what 1975, what New York City had, in New York City when they went bankrupt, they had a council of people who were able to decide. Here in Michigan, they have one guy who gets to do things. And what they did in Flint, Michigan, is the emergency manager decided to turn off the water supply from Detroit and not pay Detroit for their water supply, and instead went to the Flint River. Because it looked on paper cheaper. But what happened is the water was filled with E. coli, ice sewage or runoff from farms. So they had to put huge amounts of chlorine in it to get rid of that. That caused corrosion, also all the salt they put on the highways. So that caused corrosion in the lead pipes, which has caused massive brain damage now in all these kids in Michigan. In Flint, Michigan, there's so much lead in children's blood that a state emergency is declared. So almost immediately after the city started drawing water from the Flint River in April 2014, residents began complaining about the water, which they said was cloudy in appearance and emitted a foul odor. Since then, complications from the water coming from the Flint River have only piled up. Although city and state officials initially denied that the water was unsafe, the state issued a notice informing Flint residents that the water contained unlawful levels of trihalomethanes, a chlorine byproduct linked to cancer and other diseases, and also lead. There were citizens that demanded these financial emergency managers do tests 6 months ago because they were certain something was wrong. They refused, they wouldn't let them. So the residents of Flint went to Virginia Tech and got them to do these independent tests, and they found it was like dangerous levels according to the EPA.
Well, yeah, of course, Flint, Michigan is where Roger Moore comes from. I should say, gosh, I knew I was going to make that mistake. I'm sorry, Michael Moore. I knew it in my head I was going to say that. Of course, made Roger and Me, his seminal film, about the car industry, General Motors in Flint in Michigan, leaving a carcass of a city, and it goes right into decline. And that's been decades ago. And it's just situation's gotten worse. Now, if ISIS had done this to Flint, Michigan, the people would be outraged. They'd be like, we were attacked by terrorists and they gave our kids lead poisoning and they're trying to kill us. But because it was done by Americans to Americans in the name of American profits for the kleptocratic class, it's considered business as usual, nothing to see here, just keep drinking the lead water. We don't need kids. Kids are disposable. And, that's why they're, anyway, it's quite hellacious.
They've had to come in. Rick Snyder has declared an emergency. $12 million was spent to rehook them up to Detroit. So that's $131 per resident of Flint, Michigan. So there was no cost savings. Everything is done for the cheap disposable costs, not caring about the long-term costs ever. Never the cost of doing studies to determine whether or not they could. So the water from Flint River, for example, was 19 times more corrosive than the Detroit water supply. So nobody ever did any tests then, but now that these children have irreversible damage, this is part of the reason why they've declared an emergency in order to get federal funds to take care of these children for the rest of their lives, because they'll have lower job sort of expectations, intelligence expectations, IQ, all that stuff will be damaged now irreversibly. So they have to rely on federal handouts because of somebody saved. I looked through the literature. I couldn't find how much they were actually saving, but I'm sure it was just a few bucks, and therefore disaster ensued.
Right, they make a fee by selling all this equipment in the short term, even though it's causing, basically it's an ecological holocaust, and the people of Flint don't seem to care about it, so I'm not sure.
Well, there are big protests. They were talking about it's really freezing cold right now. All of them are going out there. But by the way, Virginia Tech showed that the level of lead in a lot of the water into the homes is hugely over toxic. But Flint managers say they still maintain that there's nothing wrong with it. Now I'm going to go back to another